Professors of Reddit, have you ever been pressured or forced to pass an athlete or other student by your athletics department or university administration? How did that go? I was pressured by an assistant coach to allow basketball player, an undergrad, into a doctoral level seminar I was teaching, and was told that I should allow him to take the course online. The course wasn't available online. I refused. The assistant coach called my department chair, who told him in no uncertain terms that it was an inappropriate request. At my school there was a huge scandal because professors kept creating classes that didn't exist, and students that took them automatically got A's. Source: I go to UNC. My dad is a tenured professor at a major football powerhouse. He often teaches an intro class popular with students trying to knock off one of their requirements, and so he sees a lot of football players. Most of the ones who do poorly do so because they just don't come to class. Dad claims he can tell which ones are going to go on to be coaches because they are mediocre on the field, but are smart enough to get at least a B in his class. Surprisingly, the athletics department actually backs him up. When my dad flunked the starting quarterback, the coaches didn't yell at him. Instead, when the QB retook the class the next semester, the football team sent someone to stand outside the classroom door and take attendance every day to make sure he was showing up. This was at high school, but it's related to the question. My mother had the rule that I couldn't play on the baseball team unless I pulled a B in all my classes. At the time I was rocking a solid D in geometry. But as luck had it, my geometry teacher was tight with the baseball coach. I came into class one day and he asked me, "Is everything good now?" He had bumped my grade all the way up to a B. It was shady as hell, and I suck at geometry to this day, but I ended up playing baseball that year. So I had that going for me, which was nice. Instructor at a device school. I've had a few star athletes that are just withdrawn by their advisor after they fail, which other students can't do, obviously. But I also had one, now plays in the NFL, who needed to be enrolled as a pre-freshman in order to be eligible for summer training. He was terrible and failed. I noticed after the semester that his grade had been altered to a passing grade. Filed a correction/complaint, and it was never addressed/changed back. Yes, I was pressured to pass a football player in an undergraduate course. He came up to me after the first lecture and told me that he wouldn't be able to make it to many classes and that he would always be late when he did come because practice was right before class. I told him that as long as he kept up with the course work, I was fine with it. Apparently, that was the wrong answer because I got very aggressive calls from his coach and my department head within a few hours. I told them what I told him. It worked out fine in the end. He switched class and I didn't get any more footballers. D. Clarification. Both coach and department head lectured me on the importance of football and of this player and on how I didn't understand because I was female, foreign and clearly nerdy. All true. They were not best pleased when I agreed with them. Right square bracket. My uncle used to teach at a Big 12 university. He had weekly quizzes, and he dropped the lowest 3 at the end of the term, including ones with zeros due to not showing up. Consequently, no makeup quizzes were offered. A bunch of football players signed up for his course and he warned them about the weekly quizzes because they would miss more than 3 classes due to games. My uncle had someone from the athletic department yelling at him on the phone at the end of the term when none of the players passed. Apparently the athletes rarely came to class, even when they weren't away for games, and didn't score high enough on exams to make up the points deficit. My last semester at college I TA'd for an upper level psych course and the majority of the school's basketball took the class. My assumption was it was one of the few taught by a black male professor, so they thought they didn't have to try very hard. From the emails they sent to protest grades this became apparent. All but one of the players rarely came to class and missed some exams. When they did take exams it was obvious the players were nowhere near college level education. Their answers read about 3rd grade level. I ended up flunking 4 of the 5, with one sending me constant emails about how unfair it was since he was going to lose his eligibility to play. After speaking it over with my professor, he offered a one-time only makeup exam that was only offered to the players. None showed. In his last game he played, He beat the shit out of one of his rivals during a small fight at the game. He literally stomped on his head in front of the news cameras. Awkward. I created a throwaway for this post because plenty of people at my school read it. I go to the number 3 university in the world and it's the number 1 public university in the world, the University of California at Berkeley. As a varsity level athlete for Cal, I feel my input is relative to the topic, even though I'm obviously not a professor. Although no documented cases of teachers passing athletes without doing their work exist at our school that I'm aware of, I can tell you quite a bit about some of the ways that the system of student athletes bypasses the student part more often than we would like to admit. The first thing to take into account is that the revenue producing sports of basketball and football are the most egregious offenders, although each sports team is not without its own set of dirty laundry. There's no sugarcoating the truth. Our admission standards, GPAs, and graduation rates for student athletes are all far below the averages for the school as a whole. For those who don't want to read the article, here are the most important takeaway points. 55% of male athletes graduate compared to 88% overall. 80% of female athletes graduate compared to 92% overall. Athletes with a minimum average of 370 over 800 for each section of the SAT are accepted. Non-athletes have a bottom quartile average of 640 over 800 per section. 1110/2400 for athletes compared to the bottom quartile of other students with a scores of 1950/2400. Cal has the lowest graduation rates for both football and basketball players of any of the 72 public schools, where records are public information. In the NCAA Division I category, we graduate only about 1/3 basketball players and about 43% of football players. The statistics are terrible, as I said originally, but to me the true picture is painted by the anecdotal evidence. These graduation rates are happening when the tutoring services available to us as athletes are not just comprehensive, but frankly can border on the lines of cheating. Many players who are deemed in need of help receive personal attention each day, sometimes twice a day before major tests or projects. Continued in the next comment. Following the previous comment, the only 2 groups of people eligible for priority class registration are athletes and Regents scholars, extremely rare on a worth of full education. This means that as athletes we get any of the classes and times we want to accommodate for our practice schedules, and still our GPAs are lower on average. Again, speaking anecdotally here, but the majors the average athlete declares in do not seem to be nearly as difficult as the average student. Not just standard liberal arts degrees either. Most of my fellow athletes pick majors that already have the highest average graduation rates on campus and still struggle. Finally, and most importantly in my opinion, is the nonchalance that seems to pervade our entire organization of Cal athletics. Athletes just don't seem to care about being at Berkeley nearly as much as the average student. Again, this is my opinion and my opinion alone represented here, and I base it off nothing but anecdotal evidence. But many of my peers seem to take for granted the opportunity to get a degree from Cal, and I view this as the most shameful part of our athletic culture. In conclusion, our athletic department needs a serious overhaul. The new football head coach Sonny Dykes has already made tremendous strides, but he will need more support from our athletic director, or in my opinion a new athletic director. Coach Dykes took over from Jeff Tedford, and most of these statistics come from data collected during his tenure. Already in his first semester as head coach, Dykes has posted the highest football team GPA average in our program's history. I can also personally attest to multiple new team rules that seem to help the situation. For example, no football player can sit beyond the 8th row in a lecture hall. Many of us athletes in non-revenue producing sports also don't have many of these problems to the same degree. In fact, some sports have even higher graduation rates and GPAs than the average student at Cal. The facts remain as they are for now though, and they are not up to what I personally believe should be the standard for an institution with as much of a history, reputation, and opportunity for success such as Cal. Yes, an associate dean was sent to talk about some special considerations athletes wanted, basically, more chances than other students, to make up missed exams. I told said associate dean that there was no way, and if he wanted special favors for athletes, he should find another instructor. Said associate dean told me I should expect fallout from the administration. A couple of weeks later, I got a job offer for more money from a better school. Had the same associate dean in my office asking me to stay and offering my wife a job at the university. I told him thanks but no thanks. Ever? This is standard practice. At Princeton, and at other Ivy League schools, at mid-semester, each professor must provide a list to the dean. The list contains the names of any student who is pulling less than a C in any class. What does the dean do? Calls the professor to see what the professor is going to do about it. Student athletes and important last names usually get a blank slate at that point. Haven't shown up for class all quarter and have zeros for all year assignments? No problem. None of those grades exist. Manage to turn in even one assignment and or show up for the final, and you will get at least a C. If your last name is on a building, that paper can practically be written on a post-it note with a highlighter. Source: Ivy League grad students. Ask any of them after the first year. I'm a student athlete, golf, at my college, and I can tell you most of the other athletes at my school are really lazy, and it's amazing how the system just lets them through. My coach won't even talk our teachers unless it's to confirm when we will be gone for matches. He tells us that our grades are our responsibility, and if we can't handle that then we have no business playing sports. In my opinion, that's how it should be. Not a professor, but taught a couple of courses as an undergrad as part of some neat ass program. I flunked one of our star basketball players and had turned in my grades about a week before grades were due. When going back to make sure I had done everything, I noticed that his grade was magically unflunked and switched to a B. I didn't ask any questions cause I really didn't care, and the kid did put in lots of extra effort meeting with me to try to get his grades up. He just sucked at the subject. Also, I flunked a student who was the son of a prof in the same department I was working in. She flipped shit somehow, got the chair of the department to agree to let him retake 2/3 exams and 2/4 essays. The chair then coached me on how to make sure he still flunked, and we designed the special new exams together, making the question something that I could answer, but no way any of my students could, unless they just had an uncanny knack for the field. I ended up flunking his ass in the end, but a year later I had to take one of her courses on stats. She couldn't flunk me for two reasons. I had over a 100% on all of my exams and coursework up to the final, and everyone in the course as well as the chair knew that. However, she claimed that I failed the final and ended up giving me a C+ in the course. The chair and I tried to challenge this, knowing it was a load of bullshit, but she won in the end, after making some appeal to the fucking dean which did not allow us to view the test scores. I'm now happily in graduate school for that field, and the chair went out of his way to explain that particular discrepancy on my transcripts when I applied. I also received an A+ on the part 2 of the stats course taught by a different professor. Fuck you, Drive Mason. I would just like to say that, while these stories may be true, and do indeed happen, academics are just as important to most student athletes as sports are. I just finished my last year as a D1 football player, and I'm now getting ready to finish my last semester of college. I never cheated or asked for a grade I didn't deserve. The fact of the matter is I had a full-time job on top of playing, and as a sciences major, I took hard classes, orgo, physics, BO, assorted courses that dealt with my major, and finished the past 3 semesters with a GPA over a 3.4. My point in saying all this is not to brag, but to just say that we really are, for the most part, just like normal students. It's like that NCAR commercial where they say almost all NCAR athletes will go pro in something other than sports. It's the truth. It used to bum me out when classmates or group members would just assume was stupid or didn't care because I was an athlete. Alright, that's my rant. Thanks for listening. My dad taught radio, TV, and film in the 70s at UMCP. He had several members of the Terps' athletic program in his classes. The one story he always tells is about getting a visit during his office hours at the end of a spring semester from 2 muscled coach types. They came in and started talking about one particular student and his performance in my dad's class. Dad knew who they were on about. He was somewhat of mini celebrity on campus. He played on the defensive line for the Maryland Terrapins football team. He's going to pass, right? They asked my dad. No. He never comes to class. He never does any of the assignments. And he's failed every test he's ever taken. Well, if he doesn't pass, they replied, we'd probably have to rough you up. Maybe we could show you how we break legs or something. Think about it, and we are sure you'll do the right thing. They left and my dad gave the athlete a D, which is barely passing. The student athlete went on to be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft and had a storied career playing for an iconic American football team. Certainly the student didn't have anything to do with the threats of some selfish coaches. I won't name names, but you wonder if all the years of Pro Bowl awards and a Super Bowl championship ring would have come to that guy if my dad hadn't let him pass. I played basketball at Texas A&M years in the 90s. We had class checkers, usually girls who went by each player's class and checked if you were there. If you weren't there, everyone else on the team had to run 2 miles the next morning at 5:30 a.m. Only had one player skip class in 4 years. We also had study halls 7 to 9 p.m. Sunday Thursday, plus extra tutoring for whomever needed it. In the early 90s, while I was an undergrad, I was a physics and astronomy lab tar. One astronomy lab had a basketball player on it. He was a pretty good player, but not the star. He was failing the lab. Read that again slowly. Failing. Lab. This was unusual. I talked to him after class one day, and he said that he'd get help. That help happened to be an assistant coach who called me and flat asked me to give him a good grade anyway or to give him a selective curve. I said no, and that he could still salvage a good grade by doing well on the last lab test and the final exam. The coach asked me what we could do to fix this. I said, I have office hours from 4:30 to 5:30, and we have a test prep session a week before each exam from 7:30 to 8:30. Tell him to get his ass into my office and to these sessions. He did. His last test grade and final were both in the high 90s, after his first two were in the 50s. He passed with a C.